The Burrows of Berea is a conversational podcast. We study the Bible and we talk about it.
Not all of us are of the same faith, and one of us doesn't actually have a faith.
And that's wonderful. We all love one another, and we're going to continue to talk about these things.
The things we believe in and the things we believe about what we read in the Bible. Not all of these are necessarily true. Some of it is opinion and speculation. Thank you for
listening and speculating with us.
There you go. That was good. Yes.
You are listening to the Burrows of Berea.
Side studies.
Well, welcome back to the Burrows of Berea. I am Rick Welch, and to my left is Billy Eye Candy Kimsey.
More fun than a candy cigarette.
Do you remember those?
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
They had the powder in them.
I love
right?
it.
Yeah.
The powder. You
They had
When
get
you
little-
blow them and they...
yeah, they have a poof of
not
powder.
the ones we had. They were
Oh,
just like
you had the
solid.
wrong
Yeah,
ones.
yeah.
No, you would blow them and it would blow out the candy
No.
smoke.
Yeah.
Oh, no.
They
We
had
just had
cigars,
straight up
too.
candy. Yeah.
Ours were just like
You
little
could
white
eat 'em.
candies with pink on the end
Yep.
of them.
Yeah, and then you would blow, you suck them in and blow on them, and then it would blow out that
They
powder.
just
Wow.
had like a little bit of powdered
You just
sugar
didn't know how to do
near
it.
the end. Yeah. And if you blew out like once or twice,
Yeah.
maybe, it would like do a little poof.
if you got it too wet or
yeah.
you were like in a humid climate, it didn't work.
Yeah, it wouldn't
Oh,
work.
okay.
Really?
Yep.
I had no idea.
Things you
Well, I
didn't
would
know.
You
also-
I
cannot
did.
buy those now.
No, we did have candy heroin.
You can. You
Oh,
can still
just
buy
kidding.
candy
What
cigarettes.
neighborhood were you in?
Yeah, you can. Yeah.
You can
Yeah.
buy them in Jackson Hole, Wyoming.
Or Myrtle Beach.
I haven't seen them there, but
Myrtle
I have
Beach
seen them in
makes sense.
Wyoming.
Yeah, Myrtle Beach
That
definitely
does-
makes sense.
Yeah, you can buy
Yep.
just about anything, including
Anything
monkeypox.
you want to.
Well, also to my left, Sarita the Rita Edgerton.
Hello.
And to my right, Jerry the Annihilator Lewis.
Hello.
Again. Welcome back, ladies. You guys haven't been here for a while.
Nope.
Oh, yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
you've been out doing various things and stuff.
Yeah. When this episode
Bangs
releases,
and stuff.
they'll already be back like several weeks in advance, but you're back. I'm so glad. Behind the glass, Rocket Man Andy Bishop. Oh, yeah.
Try for that bass, you know.
So, guys, if you've listened, by this point, you've already heard that. If you've listened to the testimonies, you've heard Mike Sullivan's testimony, and we have him here in the studio with us. So, welcome here, Mike.
Thanks for having me.
So nice to have you here. I'm super excited about this because Billy liked the Olivet Discourse,
Cool.
whereas everyone else didn't, and so
I didn't say I didn't like it.
You just
I
didn't agree with
didn't
it.
agree with it.
so. I need you to focus on Sarita tonight, Mike. No, just kidding.
Bring it, Mike. My husband's name is Mike, so I'm used to yelling at him, so it'll be good.
Yelling at Mike.
Yelling at
Yeah,
Mike. All
I'm
right.
good at yelling at Mike.
So, you remember, Andy, we did like Olivet Discourse 6.5. That's when we first
Yeah.
did the notes from the underground,
Yeah.
where we broke it down and we really got deep into it. So we did 8 parts, and I asked Mike came into town today, and he was nice enough to come to the studio, and I asked him if he would bring a study on showing us the Olivet Discourse in its expanded form in Revelation and how he can sort of lay it out as simple as possible. This is a very difficult thing to do. It's not easy. Am I right, Mike?
You're right.
Yeah, and so it's something that I've told the audience in the past. I've said, hey, evidently Revelation is an expanded Olivet Discourse. I don't know how to lay it out for you yet because I'm still in the midst of this study, and so I'm real curious. What I thought about doing was to read the Olivet Discourse. You know, because we've done that in the past. Anybody is, we've read, every time we started, we read through the whole thing. And so I'll read from it out of Matthew, unless you would rather me read from a different book.
It's up to you.
If you guys remember when we did the Olivet Discourse, I'll give you just a really, really quick summary. Jesus was in the temple, and he just finished blasting everybody in the temple, basically talking about how he's leaving the house desolate, and then he's walking out of the temple, and his disciples say to him, look at these beautiful buildings. What do you think of the temple here? And he says, do you see these? I tell you the truth, that not one stone will be left upon another. And so after that point, actually, let's just read that part. Matthew 24, verse 1. Jesus left the temple and was going away when his disciples came to point out to him the buildings of the temple. But he answered them, you see all these, do you not? Truly I say to you, there will not be left here one stone upon another that will not be thrown down. As he sat on the Mount of Olives, The disciples came to him privately, saying, "Tell us, when will these things be, and what will be the sign of your coming and of the end of the age?" And Jesus answered them, "See that no one leads you astray. For many will come in my name, saying, 'I am the Christ,' and they will lead many astray, and you will hear of wars and rumors of wars. See that you are not alarmed, for this must take place, but the end is not yet. For nation will rise against nation, and kingdom against kingdom, and there will be famines and earthquakes in various places. All these are but the beginning of the birth pains. Then they will deliver you up to tribulation and put you to death, and you will be hated by all nations for my name's sake. And then many will fall away and betray one another and hate one another. And many false prophets will arise and lead many astray. And because lawlessness will be increased, the love of many will grow cold. But the one who endures to the end will be saved. And this gospel of the kingdom will be proclaimed throughout the whole world as a testimony to all nations, and then the end will come. So when you see the abomination of desolation, spoken of by the prophet Daniel, standing in the holy place, let the reader understand. Then let those who are in Judea flee to the mountains. Let the one who is on the housetop not go down to take what is in his house, and let the one who is in the field not turn back to take his cloak. And alas for women who are pregnant, and for those who are nursing infants in those days. Pray that your flight may not be in winter or on a Sabbath, for then there will be great tribulation, such as not been from the beginning of the world until now, no, and never will be. And if those days had not been cut short, no human being would be saved, but for the sake of the elect, those days will be cut short. Then if anyone says to you, 'Look, here is the Christ,' or 'There he is,' do not believe it, for false Christs and false prophets will arise and perform great signs and wonders, so as to lead astray, if possible, even the elect. See, I have told you beforehand. So if they say to you, 'Look, he is in the wilderness,' do not go out. If they say, 'Look, he is in the inner rooms,' do not believe it. For as the lightning comes from the east and shines from as far as the west, so will be the coming of the Son of Man. Wherever the corpse is, there the vultures will gather. Immediately after the tribulation of those days, the sun will be darkened, and the moon will not give its light, and the stars will fall from heaven, and the powers of the heavens will be shaken. Then will appear in heaven the sign of the Son of Man, and then all the tribes of the earth will mourn, and they will see the Son of Man coming on the clouds of heaven with power and great glory. And he will send out his angels with a loud trumpet call, and they will gather his elect from the four winds, from one end of heaven to the other. From the fig tree learn its lesson. As soon as its branch becomes tender and puts out its leaves, you know that summer is near. So also when you see all these things, you know that he is near, at the very gates. Truly I say to you, this generation will not pass away until all these things take place. Heaven and earth will pass away, but my words will not pass away." So I'm going to stop there. Now, Mike, read the entire book of Revelation. I'm just kidding.
Well, tell me this. In your podcast on the Olivet Discourse,
Yes.
what have you covered? What have you not covered?
We took it all the way to where this generation shall not pass. And it was based off of Pastor Curtis's study on the Olivet Discourse. He did it in, I think, 12, and we shortened it down to 8. But we got all the way to the sun will be darkened and the moon will not lose its light. And we went into the Old Testament and, saw, judgments on nations in the past. And we got pretty far.
So within futurism, like the Olivet Discourse is the Rosetta Stone of Bible prophecy. If you understand the Olivet Discourse, you understand everything in the New Testament and even the Old Testament about Bible prophecy. Mm-hmm. That's why it's so key. And unfortunately, a lot of the futurists they start it by saying, well, we admit that this is very difficult. And the reason why it's so difficult within the futurist paradigm, all-millennial, post-millennial, premillennial, pre-trib rapture, mid-trib rapture, post-trib, on and on and on, is because they can't make up their mind, well, which verses are referring to AD 70 and which verses are referring to supposedly the end of the world or the end of time, okay? Yeah. And so they can never agree, and it's just a mishmash. And the confusion begins right away with the question of the disciples, all right? Mm-hmm. Most commentators are going to say the disciples were confused when they connected the end of the age with the destruction of the temple and the coming of the Lord.
Mm-hmm. I've heard that before.
Okay, so here's the deal. And what they'll say is, and we know that the disciples were confused in the Gospels on issues. Would I say, great, you just proved too much, because there's 7 times in the Gospels where the disciples are confused about something, and either Matthew as a narrator will tell you they were confused, or it's clear in the context Jesus is correcting them and saying that they're confused. So it proves too much because once we get here, there's no correction. There's nothing by Matthew saying, "Oh, but the disciples were confused," or Jesus saying they were confused.
Yeah, Jesus didn't stop their question and say, "Actually, you got that wrong. Let's rephrase your question."
Right. Or I'm going to expand and go into another topic that you didn't ask about.
Right.
What's key here is the end of the age. The Jews understood 2 ages. There was this age, which they understood as the Old Covenant age, and then the age to come was the age of Messiah, of the New Covenant. Okay? And so when they're connecting the destruction of the temple with the end of the age, what should we do? What age ended when the temple ended or was destroyed? The Old Covenant age.
The Old Covenant age, right.
But yet they have to interject, we call that eisegesis. They have to interject this concept that the disciples were confused to connect the two, when really it's futurists that are confused, and they're reading something into the text that's not there. Clearly, the end of the age is the Old Covenant age, because that's the whole topic of the discussion in Matthew 23, even coming into Matthew 24. So once you understand what the end of the age is, it helps. Now, when you're looking at Mark 13 or Luke 21, the other parallels, there's only one coming of the Lord. When you get into Matthew 24 and 25, erchomai and parousia, I think there's like 4 or 5 different references to the coming of the Lord.
Erchomai and parousia are 2 Greek words. Parousia meaning coming, and erchomai meaning presence.
Parousia is presence.
Presence. Yes. And erchomai is what?
Just another word for arrival. Coming.
Okay.
So, you have all kinds of different brands of futurists. There are some partial preterists. Some partial preterists see that the coming of the Lord in Matthew 24 and 25 is referring to AD 70. But because they're creedalists, they say, well, the Olivet Discourse has nothing to do with the second coming of Jesus. And most of these guys are Reformed. So that would be like Keith Matheson, who took over for R.C. Sproul at Ligonier Ministries. Right. Gary DeMar, who you'll interview at some point.
Yeah, he'll be here in 2 weeks.
And he would say that the coming of the Lord in Matthew 24 and 25 was AD 70. It was a spiritual coming to end the Old Covenant age. Well, I look at that and I say, I agree with you, but it's the second coming, clearly. That's how Luther took it. That's how Calvin took it. That's how the Westminster Confession of Faith takes it. And like I said, the Olivet Discourse is the foundation of New Testament prophecy. And so what I look at the Olivet Discourse, and I agree with my partial preterist brethren, that the coming of the Lord here is spiritual, and it was fulfilled in AD 70 in that generation. But I also agree with just common sense that this is the second coming event. The same issue applies in the book of Revelation. We have the same problem. Partial preterists will say every reference to the coming of the Lord throughout the book of Revelation was spiritually fulfilled in AD 70. But then you have the all-millennialists and the premillennialists, and they'll say, no, the coming of Christ throughout the book of Revelation is the second coming event. I step in the middle and I say, you're both right and you're both wrong. The time texts clearly indicate that this is a spiritual coming of the Lord looking toward AD 70, but it's the second coming.
Now, are these some of the topics that you tackled in your book,
Yes.
House Divided?
Yes.
Okay, so guys, you can go to fullpreterism.org.
No. Fullpreterism.com.
Fullpreterism.com, and that's your website, right? And you can purchase that book, House Divided. So he does tackle a lot of these subjects, and I have a book for each of you, actually, and already gave it to you. So,
I didn't get one.
You have one.
Oh, do I?
It's here.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. If you have to promise to read it, and I don't think you're gonna.
Well, it's not for lack of interest in preterism in particular. It's just
actually
for lack of time.
Not only that, it might be a little bit too much of a stretch read. I'd rather you read Glenn Hill's.
I don't have gap knowledge.
Read Glenn Hill's book first, then go to Mike's afterwards.
Yes, I would agree with that.
So, sorry to interrupt you there. So, yeah, you jumped in the middle of that, and you're saying, yeah, you're right and you're wrong. Both of you are right and wrong.
Correct. And
which ones are completely wrong?
Well, see, they both have a piece.
Right.
And that's the problem. It took 1,500 years for Luther to sit there and say, hey, I believe in justification by faith alone.
Yeah.
And no one has a problem with it taking 1,500 years for the doctrine of forensic justification to take place.
Yep.
But when I approach my same Reformed brethren and I show how they're both right and both wrong on the coming of Christ in Matthew 24 and Revelation, then it's just like, oh, well, you're just a heretic. Well, why? Because I'm believing what you say, all millennialists, that this is the second coming. And I'm agreeing with you, partial preterist, that it was fulfilled spiritually in AD 70. If you're both orthodox, which means straight and consistent and true,
Right.
lead me out of my heresy. Which way am I supposed to go? Why can't I believe both of you?
Sure.
And
Can I ask a dumb question?
yeah,
I'm better than anybody.
You sure can.
There's no dumb questions, just dumb answers.
Actually, my dad used to say there's no such thing as a stupid question, just a stupid person asking me a question.
That's correct.
I believe the true way is there's no such thing as stupid questions, only stupid answers. Just stand behind it.
Okay. Reformed, when you say reformed, what do you mean by that? If someone is reformed, is that
usually it would be like a Paedo-Baptist, a Presbyterian Reformed, like an OPC, Orthodox Presbyterian Church, PCA.
Too many acronyms.
Reformed Baptists.
Are they more
Luther,
Calvinist?
yeah.
So
like the doctrines
by
of
saying
grace.
Reformation or Reformed, that gets into Calvinism, which is John Calvin believing that you don't have the freedom of the will. So when you hear Reformed, think Calvinism.
so?
Okay.
Are you reformed?
I'm Reformed in that I believe all 5 points of Calvinism or the doctrines of grace. I'm not Reformed in that I don't believe that we're under a Sabbath. A lot of Reformed people will still, we can't go out on, we can't go to Chick-fil-A. Well, Chick-fil-A's close.
See, you can't because they're
can't go
Reformed
to restaurants.
correctly. I'm not Reformed. I'm malformed.
A malformed Calvinist.
And so you're a 5-point versus a 4-point.
Yes.
And a 5-point being all tulip, TULIP. Yeah, we could go on and on about this, and we will, but not tonight. So let's jump in. So solve all of our problems. Tell us how.
Solve all of
Make
our
me
problems.
believe.
Okay, so the disciples ask about the end of the age, the coming of the Lord, and some signs, right?
Mm-hmm.
They want to know, when's this going to take place? So Jesus gives some general signs. There's going to be wars, there's going to be famines, there's going to be earthquakes, there's going to be false prophets, there's going to be persecution. But he says, but the end is not yet. In other words, these are general signs. They're not going to mark the nearness of the end of the age and my coming.
Yeah, the problem is with humanity, those are kind of ongoing phenomena.
Well,
all of them.
You turn
including
on the
false
TV
prophets
evangelists,
and
and they make them signs of the near coming of Christ, right? Every time there's an earthquake or the jab, is supposed to be the plague and 666 and all this stuff. But Jesus specifically says these signs are not the signs of the end. He gives 2 specific signs that would mark the end of the age and his coming. 1, the gospel being preached in all the world, and 2, the abomination of desolation. Mm-hmm. And we know, and he says, there'll be false prophets that will teach the end is near before these 2 signs are fulfilled. And so as the New Testament is written, once the gospel is preached throughout the Roman Empire, all right, that's when you have, under inspiration, the apostles, the authors of the New Testament writing, he's coming soon, he's coming quickly. And I'm sure you guys covered Matthew 24:14, right? The gospel had been preached.
Yes, we talked
in all
about
the world.
in 2 different places, all under all creation and all throughout the world. Yeah, because they argued with me that it couldn't have been, but it was the Roman world, the world as they knew it,
Right.
Not the entire globe like we think today.
Exactly. And the abomination of desolation, what will help you with that is going to Luke's parallel. In Luke 21 says the abomination of desolation is when you see the armies surrounding Jerusalem.
Right. We covered that.
Okay. And how to harmonize that with Matthew's, because it almost sounds like Matthew is saying when you see someone in the temple, because he says holy place.
Yeah.
In the book of Maccabees, the Jews understood that the land of Israel was a holy place.
That's right. The holy place.
So when the Romans, who were an abomination, Gentiles on the land, all right, when you saw the Romans on the holy place, know that the end was near.
Right.
And so those are the 2 signs that he gives.
And Maccabees is part of the Apocrypha.
Correct.
Yes. That you can read in your Catholic Bible if you have one.
But I just use it as a historical point,
Sure. Of course.
The Jews understood that at that time. So, So you have the general signs, you have the specific signs, and then from there, it's just, dealing with apocalyptic language, the stars falling, God coming on the clouds. In the Old Testament, when God came on the clouds, they saw him, but they didn't see him physically on the clouds. He came through armies, whether it was the Assyrians, the Babylonians, the Medes and Persians.
Right.
That's how God came on the clouds. Now, Jesus is a prophet. He's going to use the language of his people.
Right.
But we interpret things hyper literally because we're stepping outside of their culture and we need to step inside their culture.
Yeah, I remember when we did a roundtable that Jeff McCormick said that the issue is that all of the people that were living in the time that the New Testament was being written were part of the Old Covenant. That was their scripture, was the Old Covenant. They didn't have the New Testament to look at like we do. They were being circulated and read, aloud in churches, so they didn't even have it to go back and reference. They were just hearing it for the first time or second time, and then they continued, to promote it amongst themselves. But they did go into synagogue and they did hear readings from the Old Testament. So that was their book of the time. So that language had been very familiar to them. And so when Jesus utters it, it's just like they just hail back to, it's just like it says whenever God says that he is going to come on the clouds and destroy Assyria or Egypt with the Assyrian army. He says Egypt, I believe it is, in Isaiah 19, I think. And then literally the next chapter, the armies of Assyria come in and destroy Egypt, and it was the Lord on a cloud. That's the judgment language. Yeah, I'm tracking with you.
And imminence in the Old Testament, when there was the day of the Lord and God said it was at hand,
yes,
it was always fulfilled within the lifetime of the prophet and his contemporaries.
Sure.
There wasn't this, soon means thousands of years. Okay.
Yeah.
And when he came on the clouds, it was through an army, and the decreation language was talking about the nations and the rulers of those nations.
Right.
So when he's talking about the stars falling, he's talking about the Pharisees. You are the rulers of this age, and I established you, and now I'm going to bring you down. Mm-hmm. And so Jesus is just using the same kind of language that is in the Old Testament.
Right.
And that is key. And be surprised how many pastors are taught in seminary hermeneutical rules, and then they break them when they get here.
Yeah, we heard an argument. Well, first of all, if you are KJV only and you don't, you can't laugh.
Okay.
You can't laugh here because that's what we were raised on. And I'm not
Gotcha.
KJV only, but a lot of people that I love are, and that's
Right.
okay, whatever, as long as they're willing to look deeper. So he doesn't say the end of the age. In the King James Version, it says the end of the world. And so they take, and why they used world, it's not cosmos, it's
aeon. Yeah.
Aeon. So why did they translate it world there?
Because they think that the Olivet Discourse is about the end of world history.
Right, and it was translated in the 1600s. And so they already had all of that stuff, preconceived notions in their minds and they had an end result, which was that. Now, when you talk about, this, for instance, preterism, the way that we think it is a pretty new theology, a new eschatology, right? But so is dispensationalism. It's very new too. It's only a couple hundred years old.
Right. And what I show people is like I started out with, it's not completely new. It's actually an organic view. It's, this side of the church is saying that the coming of the Lord here is AD 70. This side is saying that it's the second coming. Mm-hmm. Well, why can't they both be true? And that's kind of how full preterism came about. I mean, that's how I came to full preterism. I didn't even know it was a view. I was looking at the Olivet Discourse, reading partial preterists, and I was like, man, this is solid. This is right on. But then I was looking at 1 Thessalonians 4 and 5 and going, Paul's just following Jesus' teaching the Olivet Discourse. That would mean that the resurrection was fulfilled. Mm-hmm. And that's where the rub hits.
Yeah, as soon as the resurrection's fulfilled. And then we talked about it this past Sunday, actually, because that's what Berean Bible Church, David Curtis is preaching in 1 Thessalonians, and he just covered that. And I sent him a question about eschatology and soteriology. And it was very cool, Cherry. I think you might like this. And if you don't, I'm sorry. There's a... So what I asked him was, okay, I'm a full preterist, and so I believe that the resurrection has occurred. And I believe that it was a spiritual resurrection. That's what I believe. And so because I believe that, today, if one of my loved ones who is a believer in Christ, whether they believe in this eschatology or not, when they die, they actually go before in the presence of the Lord. They no longer go to Sheol, which is where the Old Testament saints went. The only way, and because Cherry and I used to talk about soul sleep all the time, and our church doesn't believe in soul sleep where we go together. And I said, it has to be. If the resurrection hasn't occurred, then there is soul sleep. They're in Sheol. They're waiting. Now, whether it's sleep or, as you and I talked about today, they're consciously tormented with fire, like in Luke 16, but whatever, they weren't in heaven. But today, people who don't believe that the resurrection has occurred believe that their loved ones are going to heaven, which is a wrong theology.
Their theology never matches
it doesn't match.
The funeral.
It does not.
And not only that, no one ever says, I mean, they're all going in a better place.
Yes.
It's like no one's, this guy's totally toasting right now. I mean, it's just, everyone's theology just goes out the window.
Smoking or
when
non.
When they're at the funeral.
That was bad.
That was bad. But you remember those talks we had, Cherry?
Yes.
So many times because you read it and you're like, I don't get it. Like, and I'm like, yeah. She was like, do you believe in soul sleep? And I was like, yeah, I have to. But I wasn't a preterist at the time. I was like, of course I believe in soul sleep. Well, then how are they going to heaven? They're not yet until the resurrection happens. So you're telling me my loved one's still in the ground and that their soul is in Sheol? And I was like, yeah.
Because then they say absent from the body is to be present with the Lord.
Yeah.
So which one is it?
Yeah. How does that work?
I don't know.
How does that work, Mike?
Well,
Fix it.
there's a couple ways of looking at that.
I have a way of looking at it too.
He could be talking about the coming of Christ was so near that when someone died, the next thing that they would realize is that they would be right with the Lord. Or, and this is kind of a different concept for you guys when we start talking about the corporate body.
That's corporate body. Yeah, here you go.
You know, Paul, especially in Philippians 3, when he talks about this vile body and he's connecting it to the old covenant and he's connecting it to crap, because that's what he says in the Greek. I consider this as crap. My life in this old covenant world, it's a vile body.
Yeah.
And he wanted to be delivered from that body, not this. All right. So to be absent from the old covenant body is to be present with the Lord.
Yeah.
So when he talks, you see this new Jerusalem coming down from heaven to earth in Revelation, that's not the Borg. That's not like, he's like this big cube. That's the new Jerusalem is a perfect cube because the most holy place was a perfect cube. It's theology. This is symbolism. He's saying, my new covenant people, you are the most holy place. You are where I dwell now. Yeah. I don't dwell in the land or in a physical temple. I dwell in my people.
Would you like me to bake your noodle a little bit?
Yeah, man.
You ready for some? Here's your absent from the body, present with the Lord. It's really simple. It's so simple. And it's not a joke. It's actually simple. So, whenever the Babylonian exile happened, right? And the Israelites were pulled out of Jerusalem, out of Israel, and taken to Babylon. Would you say that at that point, Israel was out of God's presence?
They died.
Yes.
God struck them. They're covenantally dead, spiritually covenantally dead.
The temple was destroyed. Everything happened, right? Okay. Any time in the Old Testament that they are on the land, they are out of his presence.
Yes.
Am I right?
Yeah, they're dead.
Okay. When you become a believer in Jesus, does he ever leave you or forsake you? Then how can you be out of his presence ever?
You can't.
So when you die, because
especially now.
Exactly. But when you die, he's telling these people when they're reading it, listen, even though we see these people who are absent from the body, they are very ever present with the Lord. They're never out of his sight. So they're not lost. They're still going to go, because that was a concern. That's what was bothering the Thessalonians. Like, what about those that have died? Did they miss it? They missed it. And he's like, no, that's not how it works. So him describing the dead in Christ shall rise first is no different than being absent from the body is in its presence. It's present with the Lord. Is that wrong? Bust my chops. Let's hear it, Mike.
I'd have to think about
You're
that a little bit more.
Study it hard, pal. Let's get on Facebook and argue with people.
I like my explanation better.
Whether it's CBV or CBD or THC, THC, whichever one.
Right.
Anyway, all right. So the question, and I don't know if you're prepared for this tonight or not, but let's say in the Olivet Discourse, when he talks about wars and rumors of wars, do you know how to locate
Ukraine
that?
and
here we go.
Come on, Armageddon's right. That's right.
Yeah. So if you were going to expand it and let's say, okay, what Jesus said in the Olivet Discourse is kind of like the tiny primer to a larger revelation, maybe, or all of Old Testament prophecy and New Testament prophecy, then where does that show up in Revelation? Let's say earthquakes in diverse places. Does and I didn't know if you were going to look at it that way. Like if I said, what are the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse? How is that in there?
Yeah. Okay. So the four horsemen, Revelation 4, I think. So what do you have? You have plagues, pestilence, war, and death, right?
Yeah. So all of those are the very beginning of the birth pangs.
One of them's the Antichrist.
I think debt should be on that list. Why not?
The one on the white horse is Christ. That's later on.
Yeah, that's later on.
Some people think that's the Antichrist.
No, that's not.
But so those are your general signs right there. I mean, they were looking toward that.
Sure.
So, yeah, and everyone will say John's version of the Olivet Discourse, because you only have the Olivet Discourse, right? In Matthew,
and the Synoptics.
Mark.
Right.
So John's version of the Olivet Discourse is the book of Revelation. Mm-hmm. And we have all this continuity that proves it. Jesus says that it would be fulfilled in his generation. And you guys covered all that, right? All the different ways people try and get out of that.
Yes. No, actually, we didn't get into the ways. We've been taught how to get out of that. And I don't even think any of us really know how to track that in our minds. Like, do we? Like, how do we get out of what the Bible says? We haven't studied enough biblical prophecy.
Okay, so some people will say this generation is referring to the Jewish race.
Yeah.
The Jewish race will continue until Christ comes.
Oh, so they're playing on the word generation, which is not race, though.
If Jesus wanted to use race, he would have used a Greek word genos.
Right.
But he uses genea.
Oh, and it's
really, I mean, Jesus is real. And on top of that, he says this generation. Notice he doesn't say that generation.
Right.
It's a generation like 2,000 plus removed from him. He uses that phrase, this generation, 5 times in the Gospels. Mm-hmm. If you look him up, you'll clearly see he's talking to his generation.
Yeah.
And so it doesn't mean anything other than his contemporary generation. Everywhere else it's used. So that's really lame to say, oh, it's referring to the Jewish race is going to continue until he comes.
Yeah.
No justification at all. Another way, I was raised like Chuck Smith, Hal Lindsey, that we are the generation because we're seeing these signs fulfilled.
You're part of the Laodicean age?
Yeah, that too. That's
the C.I. Scofield stuff.
Yeah, right. But, Israel became a nation in 1948.
Yep.
A generation is 40 years, so that'd be 1988. But you have to minus 7 years because of a pre-trib rapture.
Yeah.
Jesus come in 1981. I mean, my Pastor Chuck Smith was preaching that. How he fell for Hal Lindsey's garbage hook, line, and sinker.
Yeah, what was that called? The Late Great Planet Earth?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, you can get it for $quarter at a garage sale now.
Can you?
Probably.
A giant steaming pile of Late Great Planet Earth. Yeah.
But, so this generation is clear. And then he says, this generation will not pass away until all of these things are fulfilled. Mm-hmm. Notice he doesn't say some of these things will be fulfilled.
Right.
And that's where futurists have a problem. In Matthew 24, 1 through 34, he doesn't say some of these are going to be fulfilled in 80, 70, but Christ coming on the clouds, that's not.
Right.
He says all of these things, all of the things you just asked about will be fulfilled in this generation. Mm-hmm. Language is clear. I mean.
Yeah. So when the sun is darkened and the moon will lose its light, where does that show up in Revelation?
Well, that would probably be the decreation language, which would probably be in Revelation 6 when it talks about the islands fleeing, or in Revelation 20 when the earth and the sky flee from God's presence. There's a bunch of the new heavens and new earth, the first new heaven, new earth, the first heavens and earth pass away. Behold, there's another one, a new, which is connected with the New Jerusalem coming down and the marriage theme. And that's another thing in the Olivet Discourse. It was the time of the marriage, right? And the book of Revelation, chapters 19 through 21, you have God divorcing one wife, and she's described as a harlot, and she rides the beast, right?
I have a joke. I'm not going to say it.
Yeah.
Yeah, probably better that way.
But the beast is Rome, right?
Yes.
And this harlot is Old Covenant Jerusalem that has rejected Messiah, her groom. Mm-hmm. And so in the Old Testament, an unfaithful wife of a priest would either die by being stoned or they would burn her. Okay? Obviously, Christ is a priest. And we see in the book of Revelation that Jerusalem is stoned by these 100-pound stones, and that Jerusalem is burned. Right. So we have the divorce of the Old Covenant bride, and we have the marriage of the church taking place. And that would be soon, that would be quickly, and that corresponds with Jesus teaching in the Olivet Discourse. At his soon, or this generation coming, would be the wedding.
Yeah, and Bob Cruikshank, I remember he also explained, he said that these quickly or shortly come to pass bookend the entire book of Revelation. You've got, it says it at the beginning in chapter 1, and it also says it at the end in chapter 22.
Yes.
So everything inside that is happening inside that quickly, including the 1,000-year reign, which you weren't there to hear, Cherry, and I really wish you had been. It's because it's rock solid, but what, if you don't mind, since we're in Revelation, do you mind to go over that a little bit?
Why don't we deal with that? Because we dealt with how do people get out of this generation?
Yes.
Right? And those were really lame.
Yeah.
Excuse. So how do people deal with he's coming soon, quickly, at hand? Hebrews says he who's coming will come in a very, very little while and will not delay.
Yeah.
And in Revelation chapter 10, verses 6 and 7, it says there will be no more delay. I mean, I just don't know how language is pretty clear. So here are some ways. Like Simon Kistemacher says that soon, quickly, at hand, he says, these are symbolic. These are ideal eschatological time that God is dealing with. In other words, God is so wholly other that when he uses these statements, you can elasticize them. They don't really. The problem with that is that God is communicating to man.
Yeah.
In language that man can understand. Number
we
one.
all know that God was eternal. But
God's not talking to himself.
He's talking to man.
Right.
Right.
And in the Old Testament, like I said, when God was going to come soon, quickly at hand, it was within the lifetime of the prophet and his contemporaries.
The longest one was
40 years.
I thought it was 70.
No, me and Bob have been checking it out.
But if it's 40?
Yeah.
I thought it was 70 years.
It's anywhere between 1 to 40.
Unless he told, like Daniel, it would be 490 or.
Well, he
explains how long it is.
See, that's the thing. In the Old Testament, like he tells Daniel, he says, seal up the vision, for the time of fulfillment is far off.
Far off.
You're going to die, Daniel. And then what does he tell John in Revelation 22:10? He says, do not seal up the vision of the prophecy.
For the time is near.
Time is near.
Yeah.
God knows how to say far off means far off. You're
Yes.
going to die. You're not going to live to witness this. It's going to be 500 years away. For John, I've already told you, John, that some of you standing here will not die, right? Mm-hmm. The time of Daniel's prophecy is now at hand. So that's one way, is to just kind of symbolize the time statements to mean like really nothing.
Which is what they also say. That's one thing that we need to make clear here, is that like when I say I believe in that the resurrection was a spiritual resurrection, then they say, oh, well, you're just symbolizing it and spiritualizing it.
No.
But I'm saying that the time is literal. What they're saying is that time is symbolic, and all of the symbolic things are literal.
Right.
It's reversed.
They've got everything backwards.
Yes, it's backwards.
Everything backwards. Absolutely. And all I can say this on the resurrection, I'm constantly told this by futurists. All the Jews believed in a physical resurrection at the end of the age. Totally not true.
Right.
If we didn't have the Dead Sea Scrolls, we didn't have all the Second Temple literature, you might be able to get away with that. Yeah. But now we know they had spiritual views of the resurrection. Some of them believed that they would receive a spiritual body when they died. In other words, there was a resurrection of the soul or spirit from the body. Mm-hmm. That was a resurrection. Others believed, no, once you died, your spirit or soul went to Hades or Abraham's bosom, or even soul sleep. But at the end of the age, the soul or spirit would be raised out of Hades into God's presence or the lake of fire. Nothing to do with the physical body.
Right.
All right. So my contention is that Jesus and the New Testament writers are holding to that Jewish view of the resurrection. But let me just cover a couple more of these real quickly. So some will say shortly or quickly in the book of Revelation just means when Jesus decides to come, man, it's going to be really fast. That would be like me saying,
like a thief in the night.
Like one of you guys is having a heart attack. So we call the ambulance. Come. And they say, we're coming quickly. We'll be right there. We're coming quickly, soon, at hand. 3 hours go by. Tomorrow, you're dead. They come tomorrow morning. We're here. He's dead. Well, what are you doing? You said you were coming quickly at hand. Oh, what I mean by that is whenever we decided to come, man, we were going to go fast. we got here like 3 minutes.
Yeah. That's parsing words pretty hard, isn't it?
Yeah, there's no linguistic justification for that on these words when you look up lexicons. So these guys are just kind of really desperate making up things when it comes to the time text. Another one is that soon at hand quickly just means that he's certainly going to come. Mm-hmm. Really? Okay, so in Revelation 22, verse 20, Jesus says, it says, surely I am coming quickly. Now, the first Greek word, nigh, means surely or certainly. I am coming quickly. Quickly is taku, okay? Two totally different Greek words. Jesus is not saying, surely I'm coming surely, or certainly I'm coming certainly. You see what I'm saying?
Yes.
It would be completely redundant to have Jesus say, surely I'm coming surely. It means that he's certainly going to come quickly.
And this was read aloud
absolutely
to churches that were in severe persecution, and they needed to hear it. We have to keep that hermeneutic approach. This letter was written to actual people in the time that they lived, and it had to mean something to them. Otherwise, he is a false prophet. Paul is a false prophet. Everything that Peter said is wrong. Peter said that they were in the last days in Acts chapter 2. The writer of Hebrews says, in these last days was spoken to us by our Son. Like all of the New Testament writers it's so imminent. And they were all suffering. We don't understand the suffering that these people went through. We really don't. We don't have a clue. If somebody takes a candy bar away from me, you're persecuting me. That's not what they were going through. And so it has to be relevant to the people in those 7 churches that were in Asia Minor at the time. Otherwise, Revelation was written for no reason whatsoever. It was like, hey, here's a funny fable. Listen to this. It's only going to be good for people 2,000 years from now. And it's just, to me, that's really what got me. That's really what got me. I was like, this means nothing to the people that this was written to.
Yeah, it's kind of like a carrot and stick approach.
Mm-hmm.
He's coming soon again. He wants everyone to think he's coming soon. That's just not how that language is used in the Old Testament, and there's just really no good linguistic, lexiconic, definitions that way. It's just you're just grasping at straws. Now, the other parallel would be in Luke 21 when he talks about the times of the Gentiles and then taking them into slavery, right? And he talks about Jerusalem being trodden underfoot by the Gentiles and that this would be the times of the Gentiles. That's taken from Daniel. A good parallel would be Revelation chapter 11 when he talks about Jerusalem was going to be, if you want, do you still have your, read Revelation 11 verses 1 and 2.
Then I was given a measuring rod like a staff, and I was told, rise and measure the temple of God and the altar and those who worship there. But do not measure the court outside the temple. Leave that out, for it is given over to the nations, and they will trample the holy city for 42 months.
Now, 42 months is 3.5 years.
Correct.
Okay. The war lasted 3.5 years. All right. So the times of the Gentiles in which Jerusalem would be trodden under the feet of the Gentiles is the same event here, except he's using more colorful language. And it's 3.5 years. It's between AD 67 to AD 70 when Rome was trotting down Jerusalem. that's just another parallel.
Sure.
And then look at verse 8. It identifies who's this city.
So it says, I'll start with 7. And when they finish their testimony, the beast that rises from the bottomless pit will make war on them and conquer them and kill them. And their dead bodies will lie in the street of the great city that symbolically is called Sodom and Egypt, where their Lord was crucified.
Okay, so Christ was...
He was crucified in Jerusalem, not Sodom and Egypt.
The great city...
He was crucified in Jerusalem.
The great city in the book of Revelation is not the Roman Catholic Church.
Nope.
It's not Mecca.
Right.
It's not Iran. It's not Iraq. All these prophecy experts are always screwing this up really bad, okay? Yeah. It's clear. It's where the Lord was crucified. Now, Jerusalem is likened to Sodom, Gomorrah, Babylon, because these were Egypt, because these were God's people's enemies in the Old Testament. And what he's saying is because you've rejected the Messiah, you've become as wicked as your enemies.
Right.
Babylon, Egypt, Sodom. So he's saying this great city is apostate. That's just his way of saying it. And so, but if you go down from, you don't have to read it, but from verse 15 to I think verse 18, it says this is the time of the judgment of the dead. Okay. Now that goes back to Matthew 23 when he's talking about the vindication of the martyrs. He said that those Pharisees would fill up the measure of their father's guilt.
From righteous Abel all the way
all
to
the way to would be required upon them. Yes. So
son of Berechiah.
So this is the judgment of the living and the dead. It's the rewarding and the vindication of the martyrs who were dead, and it would be a judgment upon the living who were the Pharisees. Now in 1 Peter 4 verses 5 through 7, it says that the end of all things is at hand, and he's talking about the judgment of the living and the dead. And so in Revelation 11, he connects the destruction of Jerusalem with the time of the judgment of the living and the dead. Daniel chapter 12 connects the judgment of the city with the resurrection. And so these two events go hand in hand.
Right. So, something that I thought of when I was just reading those verses that you told me to read, he says, I was given a measuring rod like a staff, and I was told, rise and measure the temple of God and the altar and those who worship there, but do not measure the court outside the temple. Leave that out.
A measuring is a way of protection.
Yeah.
When a prophet was told to, and they had a vision to measure something, I think in Ezekiel, this is words. If you want to understand the book of Revelation, you have to understand the Old Testament, the time texts. Okay. But in this case, you have to understand Ezekiel. And so to measure something is God's way of protecting it or assigning judgment to it, one of those. And the context determines that. Here, it's protection because the most holy place is the new covenant people of God. That word for temple means the most holy place.
So it's not talking about the actual temple that's there.
No.
Because it's a vision.
Right. So the symbol is protection of the new covenant people of God, which is the most holy place. Everything else is going to be trodden down by the Gentiles, which is referring to, Jerusalem and the physical temple will be destroyed.
Right. Wow. Well, you guys got any questions for Mike?
Yes. So were you going to explain the 1,000-year reign?
Oh, sure. Okay,
It'll take him about 900 years, though.
You can...
So
tell it to us soon.
Yeah, in real time. Describe it to us in real time.
Tell it to us soon. We'll talk to you in 2,000 years.
Quickly.
If I've told you, once, I've told you 1,000 times. So I must mean that literally.
Hyperbolic.
Okay. Yeah. So in Psalm 50, it says, God owns the cattle on 1,000 hills. Does that mean that God doesn't own the cattle on hill 1001? Now, it's just a way of saying it's a number that communicates fullness and completeness. Just means God's reign is complete and full. And so the book of Revelation is an apocalyptic book. It's a vision. So, and a lot of the numbers in the book of Revelation are not literal. like the 144,000. I guess unless you're a Jehovah's Witness or something.
Yeah.
And
Well, they filled that up a
only-
long time ago,
Okay.
back when they were doing the other false prophecies.
Gotcha. So that's kind of how I'd respond. 1,000 used elsewhere in Scripture is more the fullness. Just like, 7 means complete. 10 is another number for completion.
Mm-hmm.
So,
And it's easy to, just to explain it that way is easy. But, when you start mixing Ezekiel, Revelation, Daniel, you start getting into these things and you listen to the futurists. And we talked about this in the roundtable a little bit, but I want to say this in front of Cherry. So they believe that a literal temple is going to be built. The futurists believe this. They believe that Christ will descend and that he will sit on the throne on a literal throne in a literal city of Jerusalem, in a literal temple. And simultaneously, they will be sacrificing animals in this temple. And the only way that I could ever make that work in my head is if I were to get out of the literal and get into the symbols that come from the Old Testament. If you literalize it, you defeat your own belief, because no more animal sacrifices will ever be allowed. God does not have two different ways to heaven. The Jews don't have their own special way. Sorry, John Hagee, that is not biblical. The Jews only have one way. The scriptures very clearly say, if you do not have the Son, then you have not the Father. If they don't accept the Christ, then they will never receive eternal life. That is what the Bible teaches. So if they are sacrificing bulls and goats and rams while Jesus is on the throne, it's a stench in the nose of Yahweh and God. That is a stench. Those are no longer acceptable. Only the sacrifice of Christ. So if you're going to follow it literally, your own theology cannot handle it. Your own soteriology actually doesn't work. The only way that you can is to do like what Hagee did and to split the Jew and the Gentile apart and say the Jews will continue to have the law and have their own way to God and they don't need Christ, which is a lie. That is not scriptural. Sorry. And then you have the true Israel, which is where there are neither Jew, nor Greek, nor bond, nor free, nor slave, nor male, nor female. Like, that's, to me, like, the theology cannot work with futurism.
why was Jesus, and in the book of Acts, the apostles preaching to Jews that Christ was the only way to be saved? There's no other name given among men by which they can be saved.
Jews.
Yeah, he was preaching to Jews. So
Peter
if they
was
have
a
their
Jew.
own program,
John was a Jew. They all were Jews.
Right.
And they had to receive Christ.
Yeah.
You can't split them.
And that brings up a whole nother sticky wicket, and that is Jews today.
Well,
Now,
they obviously don't believe that Christ was the Messiah. This isn't a moral quandary for them.
No.
It's not
Not
a
at
moral
all.
quandary for them. So
For
they're fine.
Jews?
Yeah.
No. Jews
Yeah.
just believe what they believe.
Yeah.
And it's actually not
Well,
even their old covenant.
let me
They've
add-
created a whole new
Let
thing.
me throw out something here.
Yeah.
How do you define a Jew?
I am a Jew.
There's two definitions for a Jew.
Yes.
One is,
Literal.
I'm a racial. I'm ethically a Jew.
Ethnically Jewish or religiously Jewish. Yeah.
The second is I'm a Jew, but I'm black or I'm Asian. In other words, I'm a Jew because I believe in the religion of Judaism.
Right.
I don't accept that there is a Jew today because, number one, when Christ came through the Roman armies, when they burned the temple, where were all the genealogies?
In the temple.
So you ask a Jew today, someone saying they're a Jew, ask them, what tribe are you from?
Yeah.
I don't care. I mean,
I think the Cohens are the only ones that know where they were from, and they're from the tribe of Levi, which is all garbage.
they can't prove it.
It's garbage.
And Christ did that on purpose,
By the way, these people are not garbage. I don't mean the people. I mean the thought behind what they're doing.
The thought process that gets them to that
the
point.
intent.
Yeah.
The intent of what they're saying is what is garbage, not
Christ
the people.
has
The people are
broken
fucking-
down the wall of separation.
Right.
There's neither male nor female.
Right.
All right. There's neither Greek or Jew, bond slave. We're all in Christ or we're outside of Christ.
Yes.
There's no, I'm a messianic Jew.
Right.
You're not a special Jewish Christian as opposed to I'm just a Gentile Christian. I mean, it's just
a Gentile.
God said, Jesus said, I'm going to take the kingdom from you and I'm going to give it to a nation bearing the fruits thereof.
Right.
Matthew 21, verses 43 through 45. And the Pharisee said, he's speaking to us.
Yes.
Right, verse 45. So the kingdom was taken from Israel in AD 70 and given to a nation bearing the fruits thereof.
Yeah, taking it from the nation of Israel.
And given it to the church, which Peter says in 1 Peter 2:9, we, the church, are an elect holy nation.
Right.
We are a priesthood.
Yeah.
Right? We offer up sacrifices
Yep.
of praise, not animal sacrifices. So everything that was physical under the old covenant, you can come to the New Testament and they say is spiritual.
Sure.
Abraham looked for a better country, a spiritual, heavenly country,
Yes.
not a physical land. The Sabbath is fulfilled spiritually. The circumcision is fulfilled spiritually.
Hey, we went through the Sabbath and talked about its fulfillment.
Yep.
Yeah, it's cool.
So everything.
So where does this thing end?
What thing?
Life.
This world.
When
Is it
when we
ever
die.
going to end? Like the world is never going to end? The sin is just he's going to allow sin to just keep going?
in Isaiah 65 and 66 and Revelation 21 and 22, in the new creation, the gospel continues. So once the New Jerusalem comes down from heaven to earth, it says that the gates of the city are open. And he says, and the Spirit and the bride say, come, drink of the living water. In other words, there's access to the tree of life now and the living water. So there's evangelism taking place in the new creation. The Bible doesn't say anything about the end of world history. It talks about the time of the end. And when you look at that in context, the time of the end of what? The end of the old covenant age, not the end of world history. So because the Bible doesn't talk about the end of world history, I don't try and go beyond what is written. And so, you know, for me,
to me, it seems like it's just ongoing fulfillment.
So this world just keeps on spinning.
Well, think about what Daniel said.
there's a lot of Psalms, and even in Ecclesiastes, it talks about the world abides forever.
Yeah, when
Now,
you
if
see, when it's easy for us to read it because I know exactly where your headspace is because I was there first. I was there too when I first got to this. I was like, new heaven and new earth. You've got to be joking. I've got my mindset on
this
what
is
heaven.
the best we've got.
No, it's not. It is and it isn't. Okay. You have this fleshly body that you're in, but you know you have a spirit on the inside, and you've known people that have passed away, and their body goes in the ground. But where are they at? Where is the person that you loved? Where are they?
Depends on the person.
Let's say the person is a believer. So their body, you physically put their body in the ground. Where do you believe that they go?
I believe their spirit goes with the Lord.
Okay. Now, when they go with the Lord, what happens to them when they're with the Lord?
They're glorified.
They
Glorified
praise
what?
Jesus for eternity.
What
Like
happens to
their
their
crown.
body?
New bodies.
Bing! You've been wanting one of those, weren't you? Do you think it's a corporate body?
But does not and I may be misquoting scripture, and I don't intend to do that. I never want to do that because that's just not who I am. In the new heaven and the new earth, there are no tears. There's no sadness, no pain. Well, right now, and Rick knows my story, my heart is full of pain. So you're telling me I'm in a new heaven and in a new earth where there's no tears, no pain. I've cried more in the past month than I probably cried my whole life. So how do you justify that part of it?
So there's a couple passages. In Romans chapter 8, it talks about the creation groaning, wanting to be liberated. That Greek word for creation is ktisis. And it's the same Greek word when you were going over the gospel being preached in all the world that Paul says in Colossians 1. He says the gospel has been preached to every creature, ktisis. So Paul's not going around preaching to rocks and trees and squirrels. He's preaching to the creation of men. So he's saying that the creation of men, you're groaning under the futility and the decay of sin. Because look at Romans chapter 7 comes before Romans chapter 8, and we see that groaning, right? Longing to be liberated. And so it's not groaning for, gee, I wish I had more hair, or I got diagnosed with cancer, or that's not the kind of groaning and the tears that John is talking about, or Paul in Romans chapter 8. Let me give you an example on no more death. Jesus says in John chapter 8 and John chapter 11, he who believes on me will never die.
Right.
Okay. What
He's
does he
telling
mean?
Martha that.
What does he mean?
They will never die.
Physically?
No, they'll die physically, but they'll never die spiritually.
Okay. Same author.
Right.
John wrote Gospel of John, whoever you think
Lazarus
that
wrote.
is, okay, wrote the book of Revelation. He says when Christ comes in the new covenant age, there will be no more death.
Yeah.
And he says that there will be no more death in the new Jerusalem. That death is the death that came through Adam. The day Adam sinned, God said, you will surely die. Death means separation because he kicked him out of his presence. That presence had to be restored, and it wouldn't be restored until Messiah came and he accomplished his work on the cross and his parousia. Mm-hmm. Now we have access to his presence. Under the old covenant, when they were kicked out of the land, they cried. They were covenantally dead. There were tears. There was inward pain because they couldn't sacrifice, and they were away from God's presence. But under the new covenant, we're in God's presence. We don't cry those kinds of tears. Mm-hmm. I don't cry saying, God, I can't wait for you to come and solve my sin problem. Mm-hmm. You see what I'm saying? There's specific kinds of tears. Yeah. It's a specific kind of groaning in those contexts. It's not talking about, I'm gaining weight, I'm losing my hair, that kind of stuff, or even, cancer or divorces, or just the things that we go through in life. And in Revelation 14, it says, blessed are those who die from here on. In other words, because you're going to be in God's presence.
What does that sound?
I don't know. Maybe it's thunder.
It's your breathing.
What's that?
No, I was nowhere close.
Were you flexing over there? Stop it.
I was sleeping with my eyes open.
So, Sarita.
No, I'm kidding.
No, those are good questions. I think a lot of people are going to want to hear that asked.
I think that's.
And then how? Go ahead.
No, I was just going to continue. I was going to answer a little bit more on what you said, because that's the way that I thought too. I was like, come on, man. I've got tears. And my vision of heaven, like when we take the word no more tears, it's really easy for us with our American minds in English
To think of the St. Ozzy Osbourne.
That's right. No more tears. More tears. You know that song?
I don't like Ozzy Osbourne. Sorry.
That's an amazing song.
Not
She
an
doesn't like
Ozzy.
Ozzy Osbourne?
Not an
Oh, I
Ozzy.
know. It's
Zach
got to be
Wilde?
some like Satanist thing.
No, I
They're
just didn't
evil.
like it. My dad was a country music person, so that's what I grew up listening to.
That
So
dude
no
ate a
Ozzy.
bat, man. He ate a bat.
He did eat. No, it was a pigeon, by the way.
No, he
He didn't eat it. He just bit the head off. He
just
spit
bit
it
the head off.
out.
It spit
Of a
He
pigeon?
spit it
It was
out.
a pigeon. The
It's a
bat thing's
pigeon.
the legend.
It's a pigeon.
Guys.
Yeah,
It's a
yeah.
bird.
It just evolved into a bat. Yeah.
Then answer
also-
the question.
And it wasn't at a
It was a
gig.
bald
It was at
pigeon that
it was
looked
at
like
a
a bat.
record. It was at a meeting with like record executives.
I wonder if he was crying because he was losing hair.
Probably. I'm sorry to go to Ozzy.
No, but anyway, with the no more tears, like it's easy for us to take like that one thing and we're like, oh, there'll be no more tears. And our minds go like on this journey of all the things that create pain and what causes us to actually have tears. And it means that everything's going to be negated by that. And we've wrenched it completely out of the entire context of where we are in his letter and what he's trying to describe. No more tears, no more pain. What is the tears and the pain from?
Sin.
Exactly.
Okay. So in the new heaven and new earth, is sin there?
No, God
Yes,
doesn't.
it is.
God doesn't look at me. He doesn't look at his children.
Right.
All right, because he talks about the new Jerusalem coming down. He says that he is in there, right? And he says we see his face.
Okay. I don't want to go down that pathway.
Okay.
Hold on. Let me take you back here. Is sin able to be done in the next age, in the Messianic age?
Yeah, there's sinning, but he takes away sin in that he
Okay.
takes away.
But are there
Adam's
people
sin.
outside of the new heaven and new earth?
Yes, in darkness.
Outside.
Yes, there's liars. There's
Are
sorcerers.
those people in the darkness alive right now?
No, they're in sin. That's why the gates of the city are open.
Are they
and we
alive
say,
right
"Come."
now outside of the new heaven and new earth?
Are they biologically alive? Yeah, of course.
Thank you. They're biologically alive right
Yes.
now. The new heaven and new earth. I keep showing a square. Have I lost you?
Where is this? I have not seen the New Jerusalem that has jasper stone and 12 gates and
Hold on.
angels at the
You
gates
just
and
said
names
seen.
of the. I have
You
not
just said
seen.
seen.
I can't see inside my body.
No. You're taking
Where is this New Jerusalem?
You're taking a
got it.
symbolic book and you're saying seen it.
So
You're saying
is
that
the darkness hell? When they're referring, like, because, the question then, of course, is then what happened to hell, right?
Well,
So
it's
if it's
lake of
in the new Jerusalem and the new heaven, but they're biologically alive because they're lost without God, so that they have no separation, or they have separation from Him, so they're in the darkness. So is that the reference to hell? Like,
Well, I mean, you can see hell and heaven
cast
is
into the
kind
lake of fire, like
transcendental.
So if you're without God, then you have to go somewhere, right?
Even in the Gospel, it says, if you do not believe in me, the wrath of God abides upon you still. So I think that's a good description of people who are alive, though, that the wrath of God is still on them. They're in the kingdom of darkness, and they're spiritually dead, and they need the gospel, and that's why we preach, come.
So what would happen, obviously, to people who die, non-believers?
I believe they go in the lake of fire, because Daniel chapter 12 talks about the resurrection at the end of the age. And it says some are raised unto eternal life, and to some unto eternal punishment or condemnation. So when we die, now we don't go to a waiting place. We go to one
Either
of those.
or.
Exactly.
Now.
As far as the New Jerusalem and stuff like that, I don't see it. In Luke 17, verses 20 through 37, the Pharisees ask, when is the kingdom coming to Jesus? Because Jesus is always teaching the kingdom is at hand. John the Baptist said the kingdom of God is at hand. He says, you will not be able to say or see here or see there, for the kingdom of God is within you. And then he goes on and he talks about him coming when he's revealed from heaven. All right, so at his coming, you're not going to be able to say, the kingdom is here, the kingdom is there. You can't see it. Jesus specifically says you're not going to be able to see this with your
He says it cannot be observed.
Exactly.
But
Under the old covenant, you could see all those things. You could say, there's Jerusalem, there's Mount Zion, there's the animal sacrifices, there's the temple. Under the new covenant, you can't physically see these things. God's people are those things.
So they're more beautiful than the old.
Exactly.
In
And
the
they're
book
eternal.
of Revelation, chapter 21, John is carried away and he sees
In a vision.
he uses the word, I saw the great city, a holy Jerusalem, descending out of heaven,
And it's
having the
bride.
glory of God. Okay. And it has all these measurements that I'm not going to read. And then it has a wall of jasper, and the city was pure gold. So that you're saying that's inside of me?
Yeah, Galatians chapter 4. He says
Because there's a lot in there, and I'm not that big.
Hey,
Right.
go
So
to
if we
Revelation
let
13.
if
Go
we
to
let
Revelation
scripture
13,
if we
please.
let scripture interpret scripture, we understand what this New Jerusalem is. In Galatians chapter 4, he says this is an allegory, and he says it's two covenants. There's Jerusalem from below, that is present, and there's a Jerusalem from above. And he says the Jerusalem from above is the new covenant. The Jerusalem below is the physical old covenant system that we can see. Now, in the book of Revelation, it says that the new Jerusalem is coming from heaven down to earth,
Right.
which is just a way of saying the new covenant is being consummated. The old covenant is passing away. The new covenant is coming,
It's like-
and it's almost here. And
It's like the rock that destroys the statue,
exactly. It's
and
the
then
kingdom.
it grows into a mountain.
Spiritual kingdom. It's not like
Right.
the other kingdoms.
Revelation 13. Did you find it?
I mean, it's right there.
Yeah. Can you pull it up? I'm sorry. I just wanted you to read. I just wanted you to read the first verse.
Okay. Then I stood on the sand of the sea, and I saw a beast
Stop
rising.
right there. Say the first 6 words,
Then I stood on the sand
and now
And saw.
do the 2 more.
of the sea,
2 more.
and I saw.
Okay.
Okay,
Now read.
so-
Now read to that point again.
Then I stood on the sand of the sea, and I saw.
What's the difference about him saying, I saw there and I saw later? Remember, he was whisked away, and he said, and then he saw heaven right?
New Jerusalem, not heaven. He
So
doesn't
what's
use
the
the word
difference
heaven.
if John is saying, I saw a beast coming out of the sea, is he actually seeing a beast, or does it mean something else? Dispensationalists believe that it means something else. Even futurists agree that this book is symbolic and that all of the things that John is seeing with his eye isn't actually a literal thing. It's a symbolic thing. Just like at the very beginning of Revelation when he says, and I saw 7 golden candlesticks, right? They weren't literal candlesticks. He saw the vision because the angel explains to him what the vision was.
He's having a vision, and in the vision, he's given symbols. And if you understand the Old Testament, you can kind of connect these symbols. And he's teaching. It's the unveiling. It's the revelation. It's the unveiling of who Christ is and who the church is.
In Revelation 10, he says, I saw a mighty angel. That's a symbol, or did he really see an angel?
So how do we know?
I don't know. You
So
tell
if
me.
he saw an angel, angelos or messenger, he's seeing an angel that's telling him what the vision means. So for our brains, when we go to the Old Testament, I don't know why he's calling me. When we go to the Old Testament, whenever you hear Old Testament prophecy, these prophets are speaking in these visions in these very similar ways. And don't take me wrong. Like, I'm not attacking you, Sarita. Like,
Well, he's said it a couple of times that it's heretical,
what is?
the way that I believe, or the futurist. That
I
it's
didn't
not
call
right.
him.
That it's not right.
Okay, yeah, I didn't
That it's
call
not
him
right. That I'm wrong.
We don't call anybody heretics.
That I'm wrong for believing.
Who said that?
He did.
Well, I
He
mean,
looked
you
at
believe
and said
I'm
you
wrong.
were wrong?
No, people who believe like I do. I think I might be the only person in the room that does.
No.
Does
no,
what?
wait. So wait a minute. Hold on. Let me help you out a little bit.
Yeah, they're just not as loud about it.
Okay, so when
But the questions
I'll
need
be
to be
very-
asked, though.
I'll be
are
more
good,
quiet.
Those are good questions
when
to
I
ask.
first
they're
when
great
I first was
questions.
presented with this idea, I had absolutely no idea that there were all kinds of different views. I didn't know that. I thought that there were different religions views that way, but I had no idea that even within inside Christianity, there was such different views, whether Christ had already came, whether we would be here before the rapture or after the rapture. Like, you hear all kinds of different things.
Yeah, I knew that one.
So I did. So when I first heard this, I was like, what? This is crazy. And then I thought, well, you just deflated my bubble. Like, you just took everything that I was hopeful for and looked forward to, like no more pain and sorrow, because you go through so much hell in life, it seems. At different times, it's almost completely unbearable. So it was like, if what you're telling me that this book has done, it's already all been fulfilled, where does that leave me? Just floating around here telling everybody, hey, Jesus loves you, and poof, I'm out of here. So I went through that, and then I had to get real with myself and say, okay, what's the most important thing? Is it that he has already came, or he is coming, or these signs, that signs, this person believes this way, this person? What's the most important thing about my salvation?
Is Jesus Christ on the cross rose again.
Right. So that, no matter whether you believe futurists or not, or preterists or not, we all agree on that one thing, do we not? That
That's
our
the major.
salvation,
That's the major. Yeah.
our salvation comes through the blood of Jesus Christ dying on a cross, correct?
And think about it. If you think your hope is just, one day I don't want to be able to cry, and I mean, whether that's at the second coming or when you die. So if you died before you believe the second coming is going to take place, you're not going to be
Right. So that's when I had to define, where was my hope?
In Jesus.
Yeah. So then I accepted, hey, look, whichever way this thing's going, people spend their whole lifetime researching this and studying it and pass on. I mean, you see it. The books are written. People,
Yeah, and some don't study at all and pass on, and they both go to the same place.
Right. I mean,
Or
Yeah.
true.
True.
But some people are smarter than others. They can understand better than others. So I took all that into consideration. I was like, this, as far as my salvation goes, my hope goes, this isn't what's important. Not the view. It was just whether or not I had a relationship with Christ. Because I'm going either way.
Yes.
Whether he's already came or whether he's coming, I'm leaving either way. I'm guaranteed I'm not staying here.
My ticket's been punched.
Right.
Yeah.
So that helped me get past that because I got angry about it and I wanted to cry about it. And then I wanted to just say, what's the point anyway then?
Yeah, you go through phases.
Yeah, like all these feelings.
Right.
But then I was like, why? Why are you doing that to yourself? Because you still have Christ.
Yeah, the only thing that for me, because it was that way for me too in the very beginning, and then when I started understanding the new heaven and new earth better, and I started understanding how I'm able to look at somebody because of my view and believing that the resurrection has happened, that they actually do go to heaven, the ones that believe, and that they're not in Sheol like the Old Testament believers believed. That was great. But eschatology, what eschatology does, which you'll find in actually in Armageddon Deception that Michael Sullivan wrote, how we look at the world, our worldview can be very negative when we are a dispensationalist. We think that, I can't remember the name of the preacher that said it, that we are polishing brass on a sinking ship. Our worldview is that eventually this place is going to burn. That's our worldview. And we believe that Christ is coming soon, and we have that hope that he's going to come soon and take us out of this. Save me from this. Get me out of this. I want to escape. But his own disciples didn't have that. They were in their time between 30 and 70 AD, before their entire world was destroyed. The Jewish world was destroyed and stayed that way for however many years, 1930 years, however many years it was, 1890 years, whatever, however many years it was, their entire world. So Peter was killed by Nero. Paul was killed by Nero. But let's say in the 60s, 60 AD, within 10 years, everything that they've ever known for 2,000 years is coming to an end. Everything. That would be like us in America waking up one day and there's no longer New York City and Los Angeles, which would be good for some. But for me, like, how about there's no more America? Just imagine if your rights and your freedoms and all the things that you've known and loved and enjoyed your whole life come to an end. Where's your hope then? You see? So for me, I don't believe, because of my eschatology, my end time belief, I believe that we are to fill the whole world with the gospel. That is our charge. And what is the gospel? To love one another, right? For us who believe, the gospel is that Jesus Christ died, was buried, was resurrected. And I believe that he was born of a virgin. I believe that. But my eschatology forever was, I don't even know if I want to go to college, because if I go to college, I mean, Jesus come back by the time I'm a sophomore.
I've heard people do that. I want to get married before he comes back.
I want to have a baby before he comes back.
Like,
your mentality is that soon, because it's always soon. It never goes away. It's always soon. And you have people teach you like, well, he says soon because he wants everybody all the time to always be ready. Well, that's a lie, because that means that the people that he told that were being burned alive because they believed in Christ, that was not comforting to them. Whenever in AD 60, when they were being burned alive as a garden party for Nero, and he says, hold on to the faith. Hold on. He's coming soon. He's coming. Hang on. Do not neglect so great a salvation. That's what he's telling them. Dispensationalism is the most negative view, the most negative worldview that you can have, because you always think it's a coming destruction. It's all going to burn.
Well,
it is a bit of the old Damocles there.
Everything
yes.
in that worldview,
I don't know what that is.
Everything is supposed to get worse. Okay. Everything just supposed to get worse and worse and worse until Jesus comes and takes you, raptures you home.
Right.
All right. So why get involved in politics? Why,
There are people that say that too.
Yeah,
What's
absolutely.
the point? What's the point in even standing up saying
anything?
anything?
Even my former pastor, John MacArthur, said that. You know, and Bob quoted that in his sermon. And I lived that way for the longest time.
I did too. I was like, whenever I had my son, I was like, oh, I'm never going to get to see him grow up.
Right. I didn't think I'd get married.
What a morbid way of looking at life. Like, but then they teach us, no, that's not the way you do. You should save money and you should do, you can't think of it that way. You have to live your life, but Christ could come soon, but you have to live your life and it's coming quickly. How many people believe that he's coming quickly? And the whole congregation raises their hand. And I'm sitting there thinking, holy crap, he's coming quickly. Like, I am not going to bother even fixing my septic tank this weekend. I'm just not, I'm just going to start pooping outside. He'll be here soon. Define the word soon for me. What does soon mean? And we know biblically what it means.
Well, you can kind of look at it like this. You should always be ready. Not necessarily because of the second coming of Christ. Yes. So there is some truth to that. Like we should.
Ready for what?
To leave this world.
Yeah. But ready in what way?
Because you're going to die.
You live a godly life.
I'm not going to live my life waiting to die.
No, that's not what I'm saying. So you live your life every day to the best that you can because you never know that you're even going to have the next 20 minutes because
Absolutely.
you could get hit by a truck.
Agree. Okay,
that's
I see
what I'm
you're
saying. So you should always be ready. You should always be living the best that you can to be
like Joel Osteen says, live your best life now.
Well, I'm not. So
Paul in Colossians 1:27 says, Christ in you is the hope of glory.
Yeah.
So if our hope is flying off the earth, to me, that's a misplaced hope, and you're going to be disappointed. But if your hope is, like you're saying, in Christ, my relationship with him and his presence in me, which is how Paul defines the eschatological hope, Christ in you, and that is your focus, and you're not taking your eyes off of him and onto the waves, then you're good.
That's where I had to get to because I was mad. I mean, I have only been going to church. Actually, Saturday will be 8 years.
8 years, yeah.
And so, like when this whole thing come about, it just blew me. It sank my ship, blew me out. Really, it did.
When I was telling you this stuff?
Well, at first I was like, well, I mean, you're kind of nerdy. So I was like, well, I kind of get it. So he must be lost in another rabbit hole,
itself,
But I love you. And I'm going to go with it because I like having conversations with you.
Yeah.
So, but then, I thought, well, geez, what if they are right? Where does that leave me in what I've learned?
Yeah.
Well, we're conditioned to think that we are the most important people on the face of the earth. Yeah. That's how Lindsay made millions and millions of dollars.
Yeah.
Convincing everyone that our generation.
I think it's a genetic imperative that you treat yourself like one of the most important people on the earth.
Well, if you say that we're the generation and Jesus is going to come back.
Well, I think that's why
they've been saying that forever.
That's why people are prone to believe things like that.
Yeah.
Because why would the world not revolve around you? People don't think that consciously, but we understand it.
Yeah.
But we understand
Our
it.
worlds do revolve around us.
Yes, they absolutely revolve around us.
Let it come crashing in.
I've taught my children, I'm like, in 2 generations, people won't remember your name.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. What are you doing today to impact your world today? Don't worry about in 2 years, 5 years, 20 years, 2 generations from now. No one will know you existed unless you are Nero or Michael Jackson or.
Well, you have goals.
Yeah.
And you're going to have children, and our children are going to, hopefully have children and so on and so forth. So, you're going to be known, hopefully, by the life that you live. You've heard it preached. What was your dash, right? In between your birth date and your death date.
Yeah.
What was your dash?
What was your dash?
So you obviously have lifetime goals. We don't know how long lifetime is. You want to be remembered generation after, generation. And so had a family member from way back when. But, that's not, it's like your hope is now, if that makes sense.
Right.
And don't get too lost in.
Yeah, I was just saying that, I've tried to teach my children it's not all about you.
Right. Oh, yeah. Well,
like he was saying, we're a me-centered generation, or the human beings in general are me-centered from the beginning of
we are the superior ones if you think about it.
Well, we have that spirit.
I mean, we're over everything, right?
We are. But what I've tried to train them is to not think that they're all that, because we're not. We're in today, and that's all we've got.
Billy, whenever you were, you and I were raised very similar, actually, in this, in the Baptist world, Southern Baptist world, and what do you think about all this stuff, man?
I was with Cherry. on this pretty much the same thing, because I was always raised that always be ready, because he's coming back. Don't be sinning. Don't be doing this. You need to believe. You have to get there with Jesus. He is coming any day now. Look at the wars and the earthquakes and the wrecks. And then, you brought this to me and I was like, okay. And like I said, you make it, I'm not saying you're wrong, but I'm not saying you're right either. I see your point. It was also one of those things where it was like, when Jesus prayed the prayer in the garden, if this is your will, let it be done. It's almost like sometimes I think even Jesus didn't even know. He knew he was the Messiah. He knew he was the only way. But that made me believe that God has a plan for each and every one of us, and the only way to get to Him is through Jesus, and you got to believe in Him. And so it's like Cherry said, whether he's coming back or 3 or 4 times, or he already has, or this is heaven or this is hell or whatever, and we think of we're in suffering now, and I think Jesus looks down and is like, no, you guys don't know what suffering is.
Right.
I did the suffering part. So I don't know, just live a life like Jesus, help people how like Andy said, it's not a hippie life. It's the human life, and do good and just, I don't know. That's how I feel. And, my grandmother would think you're probably crazy, Rick. I mean, she would. I mean, and to find out that this side even existed, I had no clue. I was raised that Jesus is coming back and that was it. And, so, that's, I don't know.
Oh, I've had many long dinners with my mother-in-law over this. Trust me. Judy
bet.
busts my chops.
I bet. Yeah.
And it's like she won't let it go. She'll just hold on, and then she'll be like, she'll stop talking, and then 10 minutes later, I have like a stack of books. Go home and read these, and it's like, oh man.
But I wasn't even know that like this side has only been preached like 200 years. And
you're talking about dispensationalism?
Yeah.
See, I didn't know that either. I thought it was like forever.
Forever.
Yeah.
And
Look, the mega churches, and it's like, this is.
Yeah, and I got to thinking, I was like, okay, like, so the problems that we're having now has always been here since Adam and Eve. It's just we got more people, more problems. I think Biggie Smalls said that, or something.
I feel like I'm the person that always points this out, not in this room, but in life. But you're safer, healthier, and just more likely to live a full life now than at any point in history. And anybody that says otherwise, anybody that says otherwise is like willfully defying the progression of time. Sure. It is a better time to be alive than it ever has been, despite the problems that still exist.
As long as Klaus Schwab doesn't get his way and
the Great Reset
destroy Western civilization is because of Christianity.
No, I want to say I do want to say something though.
The Great Grumbling. Let it begin.
But listen, no, I do want to say one thing. When you have people in the world that have as much influence, like a John Hagee, who is a Zionist, who is teaching people that
there's a rabbit hole to go down.
Yeah, well, what I'm saying is, when you have people that have a lot of power and you have a big following of people and you can get over the airwaves and you can affect 93 million people, and in those 93 million people, there are senators and there are congressmen and all these people. Yeah. And we understand that the church has involved itself in politics for a very long time. Am I wrong?
No,
of course it has. Okay,
yeah,
so
sure.
and there's others who aren't in the church that involve themselves in politics too, so don't get me wrong. But when you take that and you start shaping your countries and shaping your world and shaping where you put your budgets at, and then now all of a sudden
your point is a well-made one to me, that it is an unfortunate dark view where you have people, I mean, it obviously has never been a part of my life, but you have people like I don't want to go to college because I want to get married because I don't know when the world is ending.
Thank you.
That's unfortunate.
So
that's
right.
Like that's
I've never
shaping the world
really
in
come
a
up
weird
with
way.
anybody who not at least outwardly said anything like that to me.
How about John Hagee? We gotta fly all these Jews over to Israel.
Oh yeah, there's those
so
those
that
weird,
2/3 of them can die in a future tribulation.
Yes.
Yeah, totally.
And
Now,
we
see,
can
that's
get
the thing.
raptured.
If that is your worldview and you have political power and you have a lot of money, you are
Yeah,
literally
that's weird.
shaping a world and creating a self-fulfilling prophecy.
And that's what my book is
hoping to,
about.
Anyway,
That's
yeah.
your plan, right?
Yeah,
That's
sure.
the plan. And so America is this gigantic country of people that believes you need a giant defense bill spent on the nation of Israel simply because of its belief
Right.
in the Bible.
They're
and it's
supposed to
incorrect
be
belief of
God's.
New Testament scriptures. They're always the apple of God's eye, they think, and because of the scripture. So all this money goes. I'm talking with my hands, but
They
fortunately,
want
the people outside
wars.
this
They
have no
want
idea.
wars. John Hagee wants
Yes, they do.
a war.
Well,
They
because they
want-
Is he
want
still
the end
alive?
of time.
Oh yeah.
Oh, I didn't know that.
But he's just the head of a whole belief system
Well, I don't-
of these mega churches.
like, I've never listened to him, so I mean, I know who he is, but I've never listened to him.
But you've been affected
personally.
by his teaching. I can
I'm
promise you
sure.
that.
Yeah,
Yep.
sure. Yeah, that's true. As much as I shudder at conspiracy in general. I mean, that's true. That's
Yeah.
obviously true in that case. Yeah.
Well, we
That
gotta
if you
shut this
can
baby
influence
down.
that many people.
We got to shut this podcast down. This was almost 2 hours.
Loved it.
Yeah. Well, guys, go to fullpreterism.com and you will see Michael Sullivan's site. And if you're interested in reading more about what he has written in regard to eschatology and defending the preterist viewpoint, and also what we were just talking about, the worldview, where with Islam and Zionism and all that, and the worldviews, Armageddon deception, house divided, go get those books on fullpreterism.com. And Mike, thank you for being here.
Thank you, brother.
Yeah, it's really cool. And Jerry, Billy, I heard somebody had a joke. Somebody's got a joke.
Yeah, Cherry. She's like, it's too PG,
Now that-
and we were like, no, wait, bring
Listen, now that we've got death and the end of the world burning,
it. Yeah,
Okay.
no, now that we've settled that aside.
Tell
Let's hear
it,
it.
tell it before Jesus gets here.
Oh, hold on. I'll tell you next week.
She'll tell you soon.
Yes.
Oh,
hey, she's getting good. That's a preterist joke.
that could be
Okay.
1,000 years.
So, why did all of the children eat their homework?
Why?
Why?
Because the teacher told them it was a piece of cake.
Now,
I love
Sarita,
it.
you got
Great.
one.
Well, actually, we had to take our dog to the vet. He had an entire box of Scrabble tiles, but there's been no word yet.
I love it.
Nice.
That goes along with your septic
I
problem.
love it.
Yeah.
So a monk. It's another monk joke.
Great.
Here we go. So this monk is sitting down and he's translating the scriptures. And as they're translating, he realizes that he's actually translating a new copy from a copy. It was an original. So he goes to the head monk and he's like, "Sir, I am copying from a copy. There is a good chance that this copy has a flaw. Shouldn't I be using the original?" And the monk's like, "Yes, that's a horrible mistake." He says, "I'm going to go downstairs and I'm going to try to find the original and I'll be right back." So he goes away. So the young monk is sitting there waiting and he's waiting and he's waiting. It's like 45 minutes. It's an hour. He's like, "What in the world? Something must be wrong with our head monk." So he goes downstairs and as he's approaching this door, he hears loud crying. And he's like, "What's going on?" So he goes in and he opens the door and the head monk is just bawling his eyes out. And he's like, "Sir, what is wrong?" And he said, "The word was celebrate."
I don't get it.
Celebrate.
Yeah, celibate as opposed to. Oh.
Mistranslated. So all his years,
yeah,
no sex
okay,
because of
Only you, Rick. Always.
Do you guys do blonde jokes?
we do. Especially this one.
Blonde goes into a library, comes up to the librarian. "Ma'am, I would like a cheeseburger." The librarian looks at her and says, "Ma'am, you're in a library." She goes, "Oh, I'm so sorry. Can I have a cheeseburger?"
That's really good.
That is pretty good,
like that.
actually. Yeah.
All right. Well, thanks everybody for being here. Andy, Sarita, Billy.
Trying to remember
Rick.
Billy's name there.
Yeah.
Mike Sullivan, it's so great to have you on. I hope you come back again one day.
Will do.
Yeah, if you don't get in trouble for being around us. No. All right. Well, we'll talk to you guys next time on the Burros of Berea. Peace out.
Bye.
Dave Cristiano and Rich Cristiano have put out a film called Mind Reader. That movie comes out October the 25th. And if you will go to mindreadermovie.com, mindreadermovie.com, you will see that they're putting in 25 theaters across the U.S. If you will look and see if there's a theater near you, I'm urging you to go and see this film. The Cristianos are a rare breed. These men, you met Dave, Andy.
Yep.
You met him right here in the studio. He is a sincere man. He loves the Lord, and he makes sure to share the gospel in everyone. And he's not doing it in a way that beats you over the head or makes you feel guilty or makes you feel threatened. He's telling you that there's mercy and grace and love for those who are hurting. That's what he talks about. And mindreadermovie.com. If you'll go to that, see if there's a theater near you. Hey guys, this is Rick from the Burros of Berea. Do you know how much blood, sweat, and tears it takes to make a podcast? None. But that doesn't mean that it doesn't cost a lot. And so if you guys don't mind, if anybody would like to give to help us with these episodes, it would be great. We'll put out even more content. And if you go to our Patreon page, just search for the Burros of Berea, you'll get extra notes, extra episodes, and it's pretty much free. $1 gets you a lot. Thanks, guys. Pushing it a little bit. I pushed it just a little bit. I released it on the same day that I released David Curtis when I thought, because David Curtis is, I didn't have to put explicit content on theirs because there was none in it. But the one before it, I did, so it's like explicit. This one's okay. Explicit. Terrible.
Just put it on all of them so that Sarita feels better. At least you said when yours was first done, you were like, mine says explicit on it.
It does. I was like, wow.
Yep. We get a lot of people saying, why are you listening to an explicit content show? I've heard it.
Really?
As a matter of fact, Bob Cruikshank said it. He was like, one of my friends was like, I'm not listening to that. It says it's got explicit content. And I was like, dude, there's no rating system in podcasting. There's just not. It's either explicit or not explicit. There's no rating system.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's anything, they'll tag anything that has religion in it, or if you talk, heaven forbid, you talk about the vaccine.
Oh.
The jab.
They'll tag that too. They'll tag a whole bunch of stuff.
Well, I just put it on there because, like, if we're talking about abortion or if I'm talking about closing people's legs and a bad joke, like, I don't want a little kid hearing that in the radio.
Yeah.
You don't want to
I'm thinking about
surprise
a little
somebody's
kid.
Yeah.
I want a
somebody's kid
parent
with
to
that.
feel like,
Somebody
okay,
parent, yeah.
if I'm going to listen to this, I'm taking a chance.
I will not
Mommy,
recommend
what's he
that
talking
one.
about?
Yeah.
I will not recommend that one to my Sunday school girls.
Probably
You won't?
not. Maybe
Not the joke with the lady, the
I
Catholic
can
lady.
provide you an edited version.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think our third podcast, we said Santa wasn't real.
That was,
Oh yeah, that was early on.
that was actually Andy. Hey, kids, Santa's not real.
Yeah. It was.
It's the big lie.
That would have been good.
Yeah.
Are we rolling yet?
Yes, we are rolling.
All right.